There is a fascinating aspect of sacred geometry known as Metatron's cube, and this is what it looks like. I've been making mandalas based on this archetype for a really long time, over 20 years, thinking about it, contemplating it, meditating on it, just listening to it all these years. So the first question is, who is this guy, Metatron? Who is this being known as Metatron? Where did he come from? If you investigate, you find that Metatron was an archangel who was mentioned in Islamic, Judaic, and Christian mythologies, medieval mythologies. He was considered to be the scribe of God. So this would make the archangel Metatron the equivalent of the ancient Egyptian scribe of the gods known as Thoth, Hermes. Now, according to legend, a scribe of God would understand the root principles of creation, which are almost always associated with sacred geometry. In fact, the archangel Metatron is many times pictured with or holding a cube. So that's a little bit about Metatron, the guy Metatron. But the graphic known as Metatron's cube didn't show up till later, when a medieval Italian mathematician named Leonardo Pisano discovered it. So the next question is, why and how did Leonardo come to call this particular graphic Metatron's cube? Well, the answer is simple. Number one, he probably had read, or not probably, he read the histories of Metatron. He was familiar with the legends. And number two, he was also familiar with sacred geometry, probably initiate in one of the schools, one or more of the schools that held those secrets. So between those two things, it points to the connection that Metatron's cube has with sacred geometry. And it traces right back to nature's first pattern and the 13 very special circles that are found inside the fourth consecutive circle of nature's first pattern. That's where it comes from. And when you connect the centers of those 13 circles, you get Metatron's cube. Oh yeah. Leonardo Pisano discovered, and this is the really cool part, Leonardo Pisano discovered that you could create an illusion of all 5 of the Platonic solids in this graphic that he had discovered. And he called it Metatron's cube. Connecting the edges of 4 equilateral triangles creates the tetrahedron. Connecting the edges of 6 squares creates the hexahedron, or cube. Connecting the edges of 8 equilateral triangles creates the octahedron. Connecting the edges of 12 pentagons creates the dodecahedron. And connecting the edges of 20 equilateral triangles creates the icosahedron. Wow. Look at that. That's a tetrahedron. That is a tetrahedron. 4 sides. This is the root crystalline archetype right here. 3-dimensional sacred geometry, very close to source. Extremely close to source. Now when you systematically study this phenomena of Metatron's cube, you discover that the first 3 Platonic solids, that's the tetrahedron, the hexahedron, and the octahedron, are perfectly blueprinted inside this 2-dimensional pattern. But when you get to the next 2, the dodecahedron and the icosahedron, you find that they are not perfectly blueprinted in Metatron's cube. The dodecahedron is almost perfectly blueprinted in Metatron's cube, but 6 additional short lines must be added in order to complete the form. The icosahedron is another story, as the illusion is definitely not an accurate blueprint. This fact discourages many of the most investigative students of sacred geometry and causes some of them to negate the significance of Metatron's cube. This is very understandable, but I believe unfortunate. So one of my major goals for this piece is to reestablish the credibility of Metatron's cube. And this is the whole key right here. Metatron's cube is a transcendental form. It naturally reduces in size, smaller and smaller and smaller Metatron's cubes, and larger and larger and larger Metatron's cubes, all relating to one another empirically, expanding all the way to infinity and all the way into infinity. And with the additional centers that those transcendental aspects of Metatron's cube create, it's very easy to get a perfect blueprint of both the dodecahedron and the icosahedron. This is really significant, and this makes Metatron's cube actually work as a perfect blueprint. Now this is the most interesting and esoteric point as far as I'm concerned. Metatron's cube beautifully illustrates the mental nature of the universe through this unfolding of two-dimensional realities into three-dimensional realities. Very interesting, very important. To back that up, let me read this little paragraph and tell you a story about the invention of the piano. That's a good one. Bartolomeo Cristofori di Francesco of Padua, Italy, developed the first major piano from the harpsichord around 1720. This major innovation was conceived when the inventor experienced a blinding flash of revelation, which he called the pianoforte. So I can imagine that Bartholomew woke up one night out of a dead sleep, wide awake. He says, Maria, Maria, I've got it. I've got it. We'll strike the strings with little hammers. We won't pluck them. No, we won't. We'll strike them with little soft mallets. This is big, Maria. So Maria thought he was mad, of course, and so did a lot of other people. But that didn't bother Bartholomew. Oh no. He held this idea in his mind. He wouldn't let go of it. He thought about it. He started making drawings. He started making models. He started raising money. He spoke for it all over the place. He just held on to this idea and wouldn't let it go. And out of his mind precipitated this invention of his called the pianoforte. Is that amazing? That is the way it works. Beautiful illustration of the way the universe works. The piano could never have become a reality until it was first mentally conceived. Conceptual ideas on all levels always precede manifest realities. And this is the nature of the universe. The Hermetic axiom reads, the all is mind, the universe is mental. And Metatron's cube is teaching us about this conceptual, mental nature of the universe. And the current experiments in quantum physics are also teaching us this exact same thing. Nothing can be created without first being a conceptual construct of consciousness. Without a mental, conceptual equivalent in consciousness, nothing could exist. And sacred geometry is the Creator's conceptual architecture, out of which all things precipitate. Amartya Swami, the brilliant quantum physicist, teacher, and philosopher, says it extremely succinctly, quote, you can make sense of this world only if you base the world on consciousness. Consciousness is the ground of all being, and quantum physics makes this as clear as daylight, unquote. I would say that Metatron's cube also makes this as clear as daylight. As clear as daylight. Consciousness is the ground of all being. Yeah.
That which
from their encounters with races from other planets. The information is the activation. Let's awaken this world together. We are the forever students, and we will not be silent. We are the ones that we've been waiting for. It's pretty wild. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Full Spectrum Universe. My name is Rob Yox. We are the embattled broadcast from behind enemy lines in the once great state of New York. I don't know what's happening with the camera. It's getting a little crazy. They're putting holes in me here. That's all right. So tonight, this episode, what we're going to be doing, let me see if I turn this down a bit. Is that going to help? There we go. So tonight, this episode is going to be about the sacred geometry, and it's the fundamentals of it. And the reason why we're doing this is because we talk all the time about how these entities out there, or entities not as an extraterrestrial, but bodies on this planet, have taken certain symbols. And what they've done to these certain symbols is they essentially have made them into something other than what they truly mean. So what am I talking about? When we talk about the elites, the cabal, they take these symbols and they taint them. And there's a reason why they do that, because these symbols and this sort of mathematical language called sacred geometry holds power. So we're going to go through a 33-slide presentation, and it's just visual aid to the 13 pages of notes that I've taken down, talking about specific shapes, energies. I mean, we're going into it. We're going to be talking about the Fibonacci numbers, the golden ratio, the different types of ways to take back the power by knowing what these symbols mean. We always talk about the empowering information. By understanding what these symbols were truly meant to embody, we can then use them and repurpose them, or essentially take them back, and we can use them in the way to which they were meant to be used. Also in sacred geometry, pertaining to a lot of what we talked about with Tartaria and the star forts, the fact that these specific buildings and whole cities were built in such a way that is essentially to purpose, whether it be shields, whether it be technology, they were using this system to empower more defense to all of these cities that they had throughout all of the world. The Tartarians were a culture that was based everywhere, not just in Russia and China like they like us to believe. But so there's a lot that goes into this. We're going to talk about first, what is sacred geometry, right? So without further ado, to get the ball rolling and get ourselves into prime position here, we're also going to be talking about some of the examples that we see sacred geometry popping up all around us, right? Music, art, architecture. We're going to go through it. But I forgot to tell you, please like, share, and subscribe. Share this out, because a lot of people, when they hear sacred geometry, they know that there is something more behind it. And we need to empower them with this information to take these symbols back. These symbols are important. And a lot of the sacred geometry symbols are used in a lot of our logos, a lot of our videos, a lot of different aspects. We use sacred geometry. And a lot of people, as of late, what they say is well, the cabal uses that symbol of a triangle. But when I use a symbol of a triangle, and this is one of the reasons also why I did this show, a trinity is used in different ways, as in past, present, and future, right? The embodiment of time. Or we could talk about the human being is the sacred triangle: mind, body, consciousness. Those are this is what I symbolize in my logo behind me with the two different triangles: past, present, future, mind, body, and consciousness. So there's a lot of repurposing of what these mean. So we're going to get into some of these examples so we can see some of the beauty that nature has laid out and the creator has laid out for people to tap into, right? So let's get into it. So first, we're going to be talking about, like I said, what is sacred geometry? And in front of you, you're going to see a couple of symbols. Some of them look very, very familiar. such as the Portal to Ascension logo. There's a lot of different things. So sacred geometry patterns exist all around us, creating the fundamental structure and templates of life in the universe. The patterns can be broken down into a language of mathematics that rules the entirety of our visible and invisible world. The geometrical archetypes reveal the nature of each form and its vibrational resonance, symbolizing the inseparable relationship between everyone and everything, which ultimately makes up our whole matrix, right? And the universe at large, embodying oneness, is seen in sacred geometry. So, what exactly is the spiritual meaning of these sacred geometrical symbols, right? We're going to get into that. We're going to get into that. And I think it's important because when you see it now, after finding the information and really letting it sink in a little bit, it's going to turn your life on into a different, totally down a different path. I'm telling you, since reading some of this stuff, and I only bring stuff forward that I really think is something that'll be beneficial, right? So this was beneficial for me in so many ways. So many teachings have described sacred geometry as the blueprint of creation and the genesis or the origin of all forms. Sacred geometry is considered an ancient science that explores and explains the energy patterns that create and unify all things, and reveals the precise way that the energy of creation organizes itself. It is said that every natural pattern of growth or movement comes back to one or more geometrical shapes. Our reality is made of energy patterns and shapes, and each shape has its unique energetic blueprint, right? So sacred geometry consists of these patterns and these geometrical forms, and that also is embodied in everything around us, and it's also made of everything around us. It is often used to understand and explain not only the physical aspects of life, but also the spiritual realm as well. Just like things we physically experience, energy takes a specific form and shape, which means that even things like sound or light have their own geometrical form. It's just like science, scientists break everything into atoms. Sacred geometry uses mathematical principles and harmonics to explain energy and vibrational change. The molecules of our DNA, the cornea of our eye, snowflakes, flower petals, crystals, a shell, the stars, the galaxy we spiral within, the air we breathe, and all life forms are created out of geometrical codes, right? So, one of the things we're going to be talking about that's truly the bedrock of sacred geometry is the principles of the five Platonic solids. We're also going to go over what these shapes mean spiritually. As we see them, we see that there are essentially shapes in front of us, and we can perceive that they are multi-dimensional, three-dimensional shapes. What we're going to do is we're going to go into how they're created in the sense of what the consistency is of the lines that are inside of them and what their shape means. But like I said, also the spiritual meaning. So the five sacred solids are the essentials of sacred geometry, the foundation or the building blocks from which all other sacred geometrical shapes originate from. There's the tetrahedron, the cube, the octahedron, the dodecahedron, and I'm going to probably say it wrong, but the icosahedron, right? Icosahedron. That's probably the better way to say it. These are convex three-dimensional shapes with congruent faces and corners, with each one having more angles and faces than the previous. For instance, adding an extra angle to the tetrahedron creates a cube, and the extra angle added to the cube creates the octahedron. Not only does each shape have an extra angle, but each one can perfectly fit into the previous one. So a cube will perfectly fit into the inside of the tetrahedron, and its angles will touch each face of the tetrahedron, creating a perfect harmony. So no matter how they're rotated, the five platonic solids are always perfectly balanced, and each face and each angle of the shape is the same, right? Each face and each angle of the shape is the same. Each of the five is built on regular polygons, which, when flattened, all create a perfectly aligned shape that corresponds with the sides of the shape. So we can see manifestations of these sacred structures in everything around us. Again, going back to the snowflake, to crystal structures that are found in nature, right? This stuff it gets really, really wild. And when we start to get into the healing properties of these platonic solids, you're going to be like, wait a minute, what? But again, we're talking about crystals and things like that. So we're going to keep going further. We're going to break down each individual platonic solid, right? So first we have the tetrahedron. The tetrahedron has four vertices, four identical triangular faces, right? Out of which three intersect. It takes the form of a perfect triangle based pyramid that withstands the pressure of time and elemental challenges. Because of that, it is believed to be the most solid of the platonic solids, and it is made of four perfect triangles, a shape that symbolizes unity and is regarded as the strongest shape. Again, going back to symbolism, this is why I chose in right behind us, you can see some of the logos that we have, right? So this is one of the stronger shapes. And this is why we go into the basics of what this means, because it creates harmony, it creates balance. And if we can understand these shapes and kind of utilize them within our consciousness and our understanding and really meditate on them, it could hopefully help create balance in your day to day life. There's a symbolistic nature to what we're talking about because we know now that everything is made of these shapes or created energy wise or physically with these shapes, with this mathematical principle or this principle period, and that our creator was essentially creating a divine blueprint in which all things stem from. So to understand it means that we can understand anything and everything around us, including ourselves. So let's keep going. So its vibration is connected to awakening and manifestation. So no matter how the tetrahedron is rotated, there is always one corner that strongly points to the sky. Its construction is such that it is the only shape that doesn't have a parallel side, but has completely equal sides leaning on one another, forming the most stable shape there is. And we saw that the ancient world built pyramids everywhere. So they also knew that this was the most stable shape to transcend the tests of time. So you see where we're grabbing connections and really, really looking at what's happening here. So it symbolizes focus and offers solid protection against dark and maleficent energy, and it brings us closer to the divine. It enlightens us and opens channels to the higher knowledge of awareness. The tetrahedron and the pyramid symbolizes unity and are powerful manifestation tools. They help us operate from our higher selves, lay firm foundations, and establish spiritual connections and partnerships. Right. So it's no coincidence that the crystal structure of quartz, solidite, And tourmaline includes a tetrahedral form and a triangular form, right? So these crystals come in they're constructed, or when they're manifested into reality, they are brought forth in the tetrahedron or in the shape of a tetrahedron. These natural formations carry the power or the powerful vibration of the tetrahedron and help us connect to the higher frequencies. Quartz is known to be a potent spiritual awakening stone. Satellite helps us open up to the higher knowledge. And the tourmaline is a powerful protection stone. We talk about the tourmaline when we're doing paranormal investigations. Usually, paranormal investigators keep a tourmaline or a fraction or a crystal of tourmaline in their pocket to ward off, or at least have the entities that they're trying to interact with not be able to enter their spiritual space, right? So, that is the first of the 5 platonic solids. Second is a cube. And as Omar likes to say, and shout out to Omar who's out there, we're trying to think of ourselves outside of the cube, not outside of a box, or, we're trying to be outside of the cube. The cube is the matrix. The cube is the paradigm which we're trying to break. So the cube has 8 vertices and 6 identical square faces, out of which 3 faces meet. It symbolizes safety, and its energy is grounding, often connecting to the power of Mother Nature or to the power of Mother Earth. A cube is associated with things we experience in the physical realm and the foundation of all things, representing a perfect balance between 3 pairs of squares. A cube and a square resonate with our most basic needs for safety, perseverance, and survival. Using it in a healing process helps ground our energy and release stress. It represents our physical body, but also our rational mind and structure, right? So in nature, we can see cubic forms in the crystals in the formations of pyrite, which is the crystal that helps us lay foundations and works towards our goals in a structured way. It also is helping to balance our physical body. So now, when we talk about trying to be outside of the cube, that could essentially symbolize come outside of the body, right? Trying to get our spiritual game as good as our physical game, right? Or as much as our physical body. We're trying to get all of that into congruency. So we have to think outside of the box or outside of the cube. These expressions have meaning once we know what the meaning of the actual cube is, right? So let's keep going. On to the next one. The octahedron. You can see what that one looks like. So the octahedron has 6 vertices and 8 triangular faces, out of which 4 meet. The octahedron resonates with our emotional body. It represents matters of the heart. It also represents our feelings and how we instinctively react to events and our environment. We talk about this all the time. Talk about the ability to not be affected by the exterior stimulus when it's not productive for us. So maybe if we visualize an octahedron, it would help us to protect ourselves, right? So the octahedron symbolizes universal and unconditional love. When using sacred geometrical shapes for healing, an octahedron can be the perfect catalyst for opening up the heart space, also for forgiving ourselves and others. This solid helps us accept what we can't change and integrate parts of ourselves that we're used to rejecting. Because of that, including it in our healing process helps it helps nurture our true essence and teaches us to learn from our own embrace and our own inner world, cultivating creativity. Fluorite is a perfect example of an octahedron structure in nature. exhibiting all qualities of this platonic solid. Dramatic pause, right? So far we've gotten a few of these out of the way. After we do the platonic solids, we're going to break down such things as the triangle, the circle, the basic things that we see in nature, right? This is more of the complexity of those specific types of, we're kind of working our way backwards, right? And there's a reason for that. Because when we get to the more simpler structures, they're going to lead back out to a greater greater things like the flower of life, the seed of life, Metatron's cube, the Star of David, things like that. We're going to get there. So we have next the dodecahedron. So the dodecahedron has 20 vertices and 12 pentagonal faces, with 3 faces meeting. It is connected to our life force and higher knowledge, which makes it the perfect shape for ascension and meditation. The dodecahedron opens us up to the potency of all of the elements. And that it's basically opening us up to all that reality is made of, right? And helping us raise not only our vibrational, but also our vibration of the space that we reside in. And because of its abilities because of its ability to connect us to our higher selves, it's a powerful force in helping us detach from ego and dive into universal truths. The dodecahedron symbolizes everything unknown and mysterious, which is why it is used to help us get in tune with the higher knowledge and new and unexplored perspectives. Among gemstones, we can find this structure perfectly represented in garnet. Using it in a meditation process helps us both to both ground us and also to physically align all of our chakras. Right? So it's helping us physically and spiritually. Now let's keep going. The ixohedron. I think I'm saying that right. If I'm not, somebody spell it phonetically in the chat, please. I don't know. I'm not sure. This is one that you don't come across this shape much. I think this has a lot to do with like Dungeons and Dragons and the dice that they have, but that's about the only time I feel like I've come in contact with this specifically. So an ixohedron is the last of the 5 platonic solids. It has 12 vertices and 20 triangular faces, with 5 faces meeting. The ixohedron is known for its power to unblock creativity and help us go with the natural flow of life. It holds immense transformative powers and is used to assist us when we are elevating and reaching the next phase of consciousness. The ixohedron is used in healing when we want to unlock the creative potential and become creators of our own reality. It helps us balance our emotions and reach the state of equilibrium, which then leads us to a more fulfilling life. Now, if you watched what we did before, at the very end of the episode, we talked about people who say that they are of the light always. It's impossible. There is light and dark in all of us. But being able to balance and become that equilibrium is essentially what we're talking about with the ixohedron, right? Ixohedron. Yep, thank you, Prince. So this is if we think about these shapes during meditation, they can empower you to be catalysts for transformation, creativity, for putting yourself back to ground on earth and with mother nature. We can use these things in congruence with crystals and with our own consciousness. Could you imagine the force to be reckoned with when we're doing all of those things together, all of the different components to help us through manifestation and meditation? it could truly, truly transcend this 3D paradigm or this 3D matrix to get to that fourth, fifth, and potentially even the sixth dimension. So this is why we're talking about these things, right? So let's keep going, right? Now we're going to talk about some of the important sacred geometrical shapes that define our reality. And these are the more simpler ones, right? So the platonic solids are thought of as the sacred geometrical building blocks of the universe. And these were taught in the Greek mystery schools 2,500 years ago. These are, of course, again, the tetrahedron, the hexahedron, the octahedron, the dodecahedron, and the ixahedron. But the triangle is the symbol that underlines all of them. The triangle symbolizes balance, harmony, contemplation. Rising upward, it elevates us to that higher consciousness. The triangle or triangles in sacred geometry are thought to symbolize the balance and harmony. The three-sided shape can also be related to the mind, body, and spirit. With an upward facing point, it indicates the raising of consciousness. Triangular overlays represent the trinity again of life, mind, body, and spirit. Sacred geometry is the intersection of science and nature. It demonstrates that the patterns and the rules by which certain objects in nature grow. It can also explain mathematical equations and create geometrical forms. So we're seeing this. We're seeing now that the simpler understandings of what sacred geometry is. And again, like I said, a lot of people they say, yeah, that's sacred geometry. I love sacred geometry. But a lot of times the some of those some of the stuff that goes along with it is lost or tainted by forces unseen to us that are the archons and the elites, and they take these symbols and they distort them. So now it's time to understand what they mean and use them to our advantage and use them to retake the symbolism of what they're supposed to mean. I am always hell bent on saying this because they're symbols. So whether you're of good or bad, of light or dark, or of both, they're meant to be used as a language of conveyance. So one side can't corrupt it to the point where it is not usable by the other sides anymore. It doesn't work like that. A lot of people, when they see my logo, and it's happened, even in the Forever Student chat that we had, they said, well, I'm sketchy about you because you have two triangles in your logo, and there's also cubes in your intro. What does it all mean? And I say to them, it's what I want it to mean. It's not what you believe it to mean because you've seen it used as symbolism for the occult. I'll tell you my symbolism and what I believe they mean and why I use them. This is what I mean by retaking these sacred shapes and symbols. We're not going to let them be privy to taking whatever they want anymore. It's going to be it's going to be a fight, and we are on the front lines. Therefore, we have to do this, right? We have to take these symbols back. The sacred geometry is the language of creation. So are we going to let them take the language of creation from us? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And it's just talking about what we talked about earlier today. There's forces at work that are trying to stop me and my friends from projecting information or injecting information into the populace, and they're doing whatever means necessary, whatever their sacred symbols are, to essentially ban, take us out, cut our legs out from under us, make sure we can't connect with the audience anymore. And we see that these are the people who also want to take these symbols too. And we're not going to allow it anymore. We're not going to allow it in our space. We're going to find forms and ways to still get that message out, to still find ways to empower these symbols to what they should mean and not what people believe them to be because they were told by somebody who inverted it, right? So now that my rant is over, let's get back to the symbols. So the next one, we've got circles. Circles, circles. Circles have seemingly no beginning or end, so they represent a never ending loop. As such, circles in sacred geometry can be thought as a symbol of oneness. The idea of this never ending shape is demonstrable and observable in pi, or the ratio of circumference of a circle to its diameter. We can add angles to the ixahedron until an infinite polygon is created and creating the circle. Thus, the circle represents wholeness, perfection, and eternity. It represents the cycle of life. It helps us embrace the totality of our being, accepting all aspects of who we are as beings, right? And the circle symbolizes motion and divine orchestration. And it teaches us that energy is infinite and so are we, right? I love that. I love that, right? The circle is the perfect embodiment of what we uh, of what we as- basically want in life and what we want in the oneness or in the ability to become. We ascertain to it. We want to be a part of that circle. And when we use phrases like community and building of a collective, we envision the circle. We all move as one. There is no beginning, there is no end. There are no parts greater than the sum. We are all the same. And this is also why we envision the community that's going to basically take back what we're talking about. And Omar is absolutely right. Circle is also the divine feminine, right? We can add masculine and feminine energies to these properties. And when we have that balance, this circle is also a representation of the balance of all of them, right? So let us keep going. Next on the list is a square. Foundations, solidity, grounding, practical, earthly, stability, dependability, and safety. The base of the pyramid, which creates the balance and stability. That is the square. So the square is a very, very cut and dry, very easy one. Next one we have, which some people are like, well, wait a minute, is the spiral, right? So the Fibonacci and the golden mean ratio, or the Fibonacci and the golden ratio, all the shapes to come back to us in a mathematical formula is incredibly this as above, so below mentality. It connects heaven and earth. The spiral spirals up to connect the physical self to the higher self and all levels of being, the interdimensionality of us and into the core of Earth and its galaxies. So we have a spiral, the Earth has a spiral, galaxies have a spiral, the cosmos have a spiral, connecting the lower to the higher. So as above, so below. Galaxies are in spirals of energy. Energy moves in spirals. The spiral is also the Kundalini, which is the symbolic of raising one's consciousness on the path of evolution of the soul. The spiral is connected to the flow of energy through the chakras as they spin in a circle. The spiral is the shape of a double helix in the DNA of each cell. So the spiral is I would say, one of the more important pieces of sacred geometry, one of the more important symbols of sacred geometry. And now we have a comment here that from Carol, and it says, I keep drawing spirals and I don't know why. You're connecting to your higher self and to the galaxy and to Earth, to Mother Earth, right? So as a child, We all did that. We all would draw spirals in our notebook, not so much understanding maybe we were doing, just kind of out of boredom, but it may have been our subconscious trying to connect to something greater, right? And that now is a profound thought, thinking about it. So the next one is where we get the cross, or two lines. The intersection of the two lines is where heaven and earth meet, and the result of their union is mankind, symbolized in the cross. That's it. That's what the cross means. When we see the cross, that's what they're embodying, right? Next, the seed of life. For there to be life, there first needs to be a healthy seed that will bear that life. The seed of life is a fertile symbol that helps us convene or conceive thoughts, ideas, feelings, and even life itself. The universal symbol includes 7 circles that correspond with our 7 chakras. This makes it a powerful tool for unlocking our true potential, which was seated in us and is waiting to be discovered and unleashed on the universe. Now we have the flower of life. The flower of life is made up of many of the seeds of life. It teaches us that we are all made of the same cloth or of the same blueprint. Here's the oneness, right? It represents unity with others and unity with the universe. It helps us understand that there is no such thing as isolation. We are all divinely connected. Working with the flower of life through a healing process brings a sense of tranquility and inner balance. The flower of life is a physical representation of the connection with all living things in the universe. It is considered a sacred symbol universally, and it is said to also contain within it the blueprint of creation, or the building blocks of the universe, which of course we call the Platonic solids. These are the templates through which, of course, the mystery school we talked about 2,500 years ago taught that there were 5 perfect 3D forms. And this is where we get into those Platonic solids again. And this is the full embodiment of sacred geometry. Now, we have some more shapes to go over, because the shapes, even though they may seem, I've seen this before, I've heard this before. Putting it all together in one I guess one kind of lecture is a way to keep it at arm's length all the time, so you can re-listen and reaffirm what this means and how we can use this information to empower us daily. And we can also use this to help people wake up that are of the more mathematical mindset, or of the more scientific mindset. And just to bring it back to me for a second, one of the things when I interviewed a gentleman by the name of Mark Fiorentino, he worked troubleshooting programs for IBM for a very long time. He also worked on Einstein's theory of relativity to create super relativity and unified field theory. It's in the catalog if you go down the YouTube page. One of the things that I asked him was, what was the one thing that you found out that you weren't expecting to find? And he said that the universe is created in ones and zeros, which shows that there is a divine creation or a divine blueprint to everything and anything. And this explaining what he saw in so many different ways. It's pretty wild, right? Pretty wild. That's intense on a lot of different levels. So let us keep going. Next, we have the pyramids. This is the spiral, triangle, and square. The pyramid contains the spiral, the golden mean ratio, the triangle, and the square. The pyramid contains the number of divinity, 3. the three sides to each triangle, plus the number of mankind, which is four, four sides of the square. It represents the relationship between source and humanity. The Pyramid of Giza in Egypt was built to create the energy that facilitated connection with the spiritual realm. The top or the apex of the pyramid represents the highest point of spiritual attainment. The body of the structure is the journey or the ascent to enlightenment. Spiraling upwards, the pyramids were used for initiations and in transporting to other realms. They were used by the initiates to go through a kind of death and become transformed or reborn. The Merkaba is like two pyramids interlocking. Now, we're going to get to the Merkaba in just a moment. But before we get to the 3D Merkaba, we're going to talk about the 2D Merkaba, which is the Star of David. So the Star of David is the upward triangle is of course masculine and the downward triangle is feminine. The two merging in perfect harmony. This is the balance that we talk about when we talk about masculine energy and feminine energy. And when you can balance the both, your frequency or vibration will soar up through third dimension, or fourth density, fifth density, whatever you want to call it. But this is what we talk about, right? This is what this symbol represents. So the next symbol, of course, is going to be the third dimensional Merkaba or interlocking triangles. So all sacred symbols make up the Merkaba. The Merkaba, or the star tetrahedron symbols, or it's called the star tetrahedron, symbolizes the element of fire. It is in regards as the vehicle of light and has the mighty energy field. It helps us connect the inner strength and power we harbor, even if we are not consciously aware of its potency. This sacred symbol blends the feminine and the masculine, the spiritual and physical, helping create a balance between opposing energies. It teaches us that the differences can coexist and that we don't have to exclude one or the other. This is coexistence right in front of you, symbolized in a Merkaba. In a healing process, it is used to stimulate personal growth because it unites light, spirit, and body. It helps us operate from a much higher vibration. So, as it pertains to symbols, this is the last one. We've all seen this before. This is Metatron's cube. Metatron's cube is a very controversial symbol. But if we talk about what we said before about taking our symbols back, this is one of those symbols that we have to engage and make sure that we reclaim its energy for the side of light. This is why I left this one for last, but also in the natural progression, it's one of the more encompassing or unique symbols. This sacred form is associated with the angel of Metatron, who guides us and helps us connect the physical and the spiritual realms. In the healing process, we can use it to release our limiting beliefs, our patterns, and our sorrows that weigh us down. Metatron's cube helps us see the light at the end of the tunnel and embrace a higher purpose and meaning in our earthly experiences. So, this actually is the symbolism to help us see outside of the cube. This is what that means. To look at our earthly experiences from a spiritual place and understand them and ourselves more. So While some may say that this is a bad thing, and I don't know why they would say it's a bad thing, or maybe because it had been tainted in so many different ways that now we're putting our focus and our intention back into reclaiming it. So we can have the experience of unlocking our limitless potential. And if you notice, a lot of the things and the small little clips that I say, like that's wild and our limitless potential, some of those small little phrases I say are directly congruent with sacred geometry. Now, it's not that I'm looking at sacred geometry, but there's synchronicity now looking at it from a different perspective, right? So whether that's intentional or not, I'm not sure. But my subconscious tells me to say those things and I say them. So is it my vibrational resonance that I'm sort of, taking in the sacred geometry around me without even realizing it? Possibly, possibly. So what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about the golden ratio and examples of it in real life. We're going to show you architecture and paintings, but also tell you about specific songs that have the golden ratio in it, right? I can't show you the songs because you would have to hear them, but we're going to talk about them, right? So the golden ratio, which occurs when the ratio of the sum of two quantities equals the ratio of the quantity as a whole, which is symbolized by the number of 1.618 or the Greek letter pi. It has been used to create what are regarded as the most aesthetically pleasing designs that display perfect symmetry in architecture and art, right? So here's where we get a little wild. This is where things get a little crazy here. So we're going to talk about what they are, the places that we see this golden ratio being used. So it provides a near flawless beauty. When looking for examples of the golden ratio in everyday life, you may be astonished at how many times it has been employed to construct the numerous monumental buildings and structures. When the golden ratio is employed in architecture, the structure is referred to as sacred architecture. Some examples of this can be the Parthenon, the Great Pyramid of Giza, Carteris Cathedral, the Porch of Maidens, the Taj Mahal. So you're seeing it's transcending cultures, right? The United Nations building, the Great Mosque of Kiroan. So we're seeing all these things, and we're like, "Wow, this is it's pretty exceptional." So now we're going to talk about art and the golden ratio in art. And there are numerous examples of master artists who have used the golden ratio in their art. These works of art are created and utilize the golden rectangular and golden triangle ratios. And art based on the golden ratio is more appealing to the human eye. Imagine that the golden ratio in sacred geometry is essentially being more pleasing or aesthetically pleasing to the eye because your body is resonating with what you see, even if you're not aware of it. So some examples of this art with the golden ratio are the Mona Lisa and the Vitruvian Man by Leonardo da Vinci. Pretty crazy. The Crucifixion by Raphael. It's clear how a lot of these are religious, right? And even though we're staying away from the religious aspects of it, there's something to the sacred geometry behind religion, right? The Self Portrait by Rembrandt. The Birth of Venus by Botticelli. Sorry, I said that wrong. David and the Holy Family by Michelangelo in the 16th Chapel. The Sacrament of the Last Supper and the Persistence of Memory by Salvador Dali. And now we have the last section of what we're going to be talking about. And that is, well, we could talk about the music. There's music that has golden ratio in it. And first one is Claude Debussy, the Dialogue de Vent à l'Amour. Bartok's music for strings, percussion, and celesta in the first movement. Mozart's Sonata 1 in C major. Beethoven's Fifth Symphony and first movement. Eric Satie in the Cerisi and La Rose Croix. Right? So now we're going to talk about the Fibonacci. The Fibonacci sequence is a set of integers, the Fibonacci numbers, that starts with 0, followed by a 1, and then by another 1, and then by a series of steadily increasing numbers. The sequence follows the rule that each number is equal to the sum of the preceding two numbers. So the Fibonacci sequence begins with the following 14 integers: 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, 55, 89, 144, 233. Each number, starting with the third, adheres to the prescribed formula. For example, the seventh number, 8, is preceded by 3 and 5, which add up to 8. So the system can theoretically continue to infinity using the same formula for each new number. Some resources show the Fibonacci sequence starting with a 1 instead of a 0, but this is fairly uncommon, right? So the history of the Fibonacci sequence. The Fibonacci sequence is named for Leonardo Pisano, also known as Fibonacci, an Italian mathematician who lived from 1170 to 1250. Fibonacci considered the sequence to be an answer to the following question: how many pairs of rabbits will be produced in a year, beginning with a single pair? If in every month each pair bears a new pair which becomes productive from the second month on, the result can be expressed numerally as 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, and so on. A Sanskrit grammarian, Pingala, is credited with the first mention of the sequence of numbers sometime between the 5th century BC and the 2nd or 3rd century AD. And since Fibonacci introduced this series to Western civilization, it has had a high profile from time to time. In the Da Vinci Code, for example, the Fibonacci sequence is a part of an important clue. Another application, the Fibonacci poem, is a verse in which the progression of the syllable numbers per line follows the same Fibonacci sequence. Fibonacci numbers can also be used to define a spiral and are of interest to biologists and physicists because they are frequently observed in various natural objects and phenomena. The branching pattern in trees and leaves, for example, and the disruption of seeds in the raspberry reflect the Fibonacci sequence. So the Fibonacci sequence is often associated with the golden ratio, a proportion roughly 1 to 1.6 that occurs frequently throughout the natural world, and it is applied across many areas of the human endeavor. Both the Fibonacci sequence and the golden ratio are used to guide and design for architecture, websites, interfaces, among other things. So the Fibonacci sequence is the last spot, that we're going to talk about in the fundamentals of sacred geometry. Now, we can keep going and find different forms, different meanings, but this was a good place to stop the first video because I think we've covered a lot. There is a lot here, but there's also ways in which we can use these shapes and uh, these specific symbols to enhance our body, our meditation, our consciousness, our contact with the higher self, our contact with the earth around us, and the spiritual aspects of who and what we are. Also, to categorize our unlimited potential, right? Energy doesn't die, it merely changes shape. And the Fibonacci sequence also shows that. And the numbers also show that no matter
which
what,
is
when given.
critical in understanding the true value of pi, which we have established as 3.144, is an understanding of something called the mystical squaring of the circle. In olden days, it was called the mystical quadrature, because what we're interested in is drawing a square. So we'll call it the unit square, which is 1 by 1. So I'm going to give that a value. We'll call that distance of the square, called the unit square, is 1. And we know that the perimeter of that square must be 4, because we're going to talk about this later on. So we know that the perimeter of this square is 4. So in ancient times, they had two types of squaring of the circle. One was based on the square area. We could look at the square area. But what we're concerned with today is actually the perimeters of the square and the circumference of the circle. And that's got another name as distinguished from the squaring of the circle. We're calling it the rectification of the circle. So when we say rectification, we're talking about making equal perimeters. So I'm going to draw in this circle now. So this has an interesting mathematics to it. Just notice that this circle comes in on the corners, not just like that. So that's equal perimeter of a square is equal to the circumference. So that means if this square is 1 by 1 by 1 by 1, that's 4. That string is 4 meters long if that's 1 meter. So if I picked up this string of 4 meters and I said, what's the corresponding circle that is also 4 meters? Well, this is the answer. And we want to know what the radius is, or the diameter of that. It's more than 1. We know that from here to there is 1. Oh no, from the square to there is 1, but we don't know that whole distance. So let's give them values. We'll call it A, B, C, D is the square. A, B, C, D is the square. But the circle that protrudes, we're going to call that G, H, and the points on the square here, A, B, C, D, we'll call this E, F, and the center is also called the origin. So that's called the origin. So now we've got our grid. We know that it's the unit square. Today's lesson is we want to know the distance of the diameter of that big circle now. To in a general way, to how to square a circle is, let's say we have a square. Okay, we might just use the white here. So I'm going to draw a square, and this square that's the A, B, C, D that we showed before. So A, B, C, D. I'm going to cut it in half. So we've bisected the square. We do another half, because half of a half is a quarter, but half of a quarter is an eighth. So by just taking all these midpoints like that, we've created a grid, an 8 by 8 grid that has 64 mini squares or little cells, 88 cells. So that's an 8 by 8 grid. So you visualize that we pick this up and put it there. So A, B, C, D is really 64 little cells. The relationship to square the circle is that when the circle is equal in perimeter to the square, there's actually another square going around this. There's another square going around it, and that square happens to be 9 by 9. So the ratio of 8 to 9, or 8 ninths, is the key, the geometric key that unlocks the mystery of the squaring of the circle, is having a square that's an 8 by 8 like your chessboard, and the circle will touch the 9 by 9, and that ratio 8 to 9 is of deep significance, high significance in all mathematical inquiry. Okay, so we're halfway there. So we need to do a little bit of calculation, and because I've only got this short segment in 10 minutes, what I'd like to show you is that if I wanted to know the radius of this, I can do some mathematics to calculate the distance from G, I wrote it in pink, so to go from G to H, we know that G to H must be more than 1, it's greater than 1. That symbol is called greater than. And after a little bit of calculation, which we don't have the time to do now, it's established that the diameter of this larger circle now is, let's write this down. So we'll say that EF, the square, EF to there, which is in the square, equals 1 unit. But GH, the extrapolated length of the square, is a bit more than 1, and it's called 1.272. And 1.272 is called the square root of the golden ratio. And what this means is what number multiplied by itself will give us 1.618033988. It goes on. So that's called phi, but we're interested in the square root of phi. So the distance from there to there, that which makes the bells ring, that which makes this like a highly tuned instrument of the highest order, that which makes heaven and earth equal, because the square represents the earth plane and the circle is the spirit, the divine. So by making them equal, when we rectify the circle, equal perimeters, the key is the new diameter, which is 1.272, and it's got a name, and this is my name for it that everyone's using now. I love this name. It's called the golden root. Just like you have a golden rectangle, golden triangle, I'm defining this diameter as the golden root 1.272, which, as we discussed previously, is the vertical height of the pyramid in Giza. The vertical height in relation to half its base, 1 unit. Okay, so we just explained that we rectified the circle. We made the perimeter of this, we made the perimeter of the square equal to the circle. So what's the perimeter of the square? It's 1, 2, 3, 4. It doesn't matter whether it's 1 unit, 1 meter, 1 mile. So now we know that 4 is equal to the perimeter of the circle, which we call the circumference. So the perimeter of any circle has a formula called pi times the diameter. We don't know what pi is. We've assumed pi for 2,500 years as an approximation to 3.141. That's the thing. We thought pi is approximation is 3.141. They always, Archimedes even said that's an approximation. Now we're going to fine tune this this musical instrument, this geometrical masterpiece. So we're equating the 4 equals pi times d. That's the circumference. C equals pi d. But we know the diameter, GH. We know that GH is the golden root of root phi. So our equation becomes 4 equals pi times the square root of phi. But we want to know what pi is. This whole inquiry, what is the true value of pi? We want to establish that pi equals something. So because we have over here, we have here 4, the perimeter of the square equals pi times root phi. If I divide both sides by 4, what I've got pi here, so I'm going to put pi here, and to get pi on its own, I have to divide this side and that side by the golden root. So the answer is pi equals 4 divided by the square root of phi. So if you divided 4 by 1.272, we get this amazing timeless ancient value called 3.144, which contains the harmonics of the speed of light, 144. This is such a brilliant and simple revelation that I feel it really needs to be taught, and actually taught to children at the high school level. This is a connection between heaven and earth, where we find that everything has its perfect proportion.
I want to take you through a little exercise of the imagination that will help understand and distinguish different kinds of knots. So we're going to begin with the most ordinary knot of all, the unknot. Here's a unknot in the form of a loop of tubing. But what you may not realize right away is that this tubing has magical properties. It creates a singularity in the fabric of the universe. And what it does is that if you look through the tubing, the universe you see through the tubing gradually drifts away from the universe on this side of the tubing. And over many years, its properties and its occupants change a lot. That world through the tubing is called Narnia. I can step through this magical loop. It's like a doorway into another world, the world Narnia. Here we are in Narnia. We've been exploring, we've had lots of adventures and seen many unusual and interesting sights, but we've arrived finally back at this coil, this unknotted coil, and when we look through it again, we see Earth. I'm kind of tired of being in Narnia, so I'm going to step through the coil and I'm back in Earth again. This tubing creates a two-way branching in the universe. When I go through it once, I go from Earth to Narnia. If I go through it again, I go from Narnia back to Earth. I can keep going as many times as I want, from Earth to Narnia. And it doesn't matter which direction I go through. I went from Earth to Narnia. Here I'm in Narnia, and I can step back out, and I'm in Earth again, and so forth. This is the property of the tubing. But the tubing doesn't have to be just arranged as an ordinary kind of unknotted door. What happens if you knot the tubing? Will it create the same kind of split in the universe, or will it create a different kind of split? Well, let's try and find out. Okay, here I've arranged the magical tubing in a different pattern, in the shape of a knot. So what you see now that the knot has created is 4 windows to other possible worlds. There's a window at the bottom, there's a window in the middle, there's a window at your upper right, and a window at your upper left. And these all possibly go to different universes. If we were to pass through one of the windows to one of the other universes, we could go around and look further, and we'd still perhaps different, or perhaps some of the same universes again. Just remember that whenever you go twice around the knot, you get back where you started, twice around a little strand of the knot. Here's a diagram of the 4 windows created by the knot. And I've labeled 2 of them, A and B. I haven't labeled the other 2. That's deliberate. That's for a reason, because as you'll see, you can achieve the same effect as going through the middle by first going through A and then going through B. Let me show you how that works. Take a piece of rope, first put it through A, and now put it through B, and it's the same effect as going through the middle. So I'm justified in saying that the middle is A, B. well, once we know how to achieve the effect of going through the middle portal by A's and B's, we can also figure out a way to go through this upper right portal. And the reason is we can go through the middle and then back through A, and it'll be the same effect as going through the middle. But remember, when you go through A forwards or backwards, it's always the same, since the knot is creating only an order 2 branching, a twofold branching. Let's try it with rope and find out. So I'm going to go through the middle and back through A, and it's the same as going through this upper right portal. And I'll write this equation. So I found that I can get here by going through A, through B, and through A again, because AB goes through the middle, and I'm really coming back through A, but I'm counting it the same as going forward through A. Well, I can also use this little region of the knot here to find an alternate route to get through the upper left. Namely, I can come back through B and then down through AB, and that'll be the same as going through the middle. So I'm going to just write it back through B. That's a B, and then through AB, and I achieve the same effect. So I have an equation that BAB equals ABA. I get to the same place by first doing B, then A, then B, as I do by doing A and B and A. With this information, we can easily draw a diagram of all the possible worlds we get to through the trefoil knot. Here's our home world. From our home, we can start out by going A, or we can start out by going B. Once we're here, if we go through A again, we'll get back home. But if we go through B, we'll get to another world. This is the same one you get by going through the window in the middle. From here, once you've done B, you can do A again, and you get to a different place. Now if we continue from here, if we do B, we'll get back to where we were before, but if we do an A, we're at a different place. And here, if we do A, we're back to where we were before, but if we do B, we're at a still different place. And here I have that ABA equals BAB. So the trefoil knot with this two-way branching around it creates 6 different worlds. It creates a diagram like so. You notice that the passageway through this upper right passageway would be really going like so. If you go ABA, and if you do it again, ABA again, you get back to where you started. So that's that effect. If you're over here and you do ABA, you get to here. Do it again, you get back again. And from here, ABA it takes you to here and back again. So that's this upper right. It's interesting to look at the middle passageway, what happens here. It's a little bit different. So far, all the passageways we've thought about very hard have taken you to a different world. If you go through again, you get back to the same world. And that's because they were just going around a little piece of the knot. But AB, the AB door is a little different. If you start here and if you do AB, you get to this corner of the hexagon. If you do AB again, you get to this corner of the hexagon. And if you do AB again, you get to back home. So the trefoil knot has forced this pattern on us. Going to the middle doorway, you have to go through 3 times to get back home. Any knot you have will create some form of a branching universe. And you can often use this to distinguish between different knots. We know the trefoil knot is not the unknot. It's really knotted because it creates a different branching pattern in the universe.